Rick for words of exhortation.
Good morning, everyone, young people, brothers and sisters, and friends. I'd like to look at this morning a portion of David's life, the story that we heard read to us this morning by our brother Bob, actually a portion of that story, taken from 1 Chronicles 13. That's where we are in the Old Testament readings. The first Old Testament reading, I should say. And I was looking at how the transportation of the Ark of the Covenant from a city of Kirjath-Jearim to Jerusalem, and some things began to come to light, I think, that were very important. Some very symbolic things that have a long-term meaning and application, I think, to us, especially, just as much as they did to David and the people of Israel at that time. And we heard read to us chapter 13, and the story of how they decided to take the ark and move it to Jerusalem. And I want to look at this morning the reason why they took the ark to Jerusalem. And I also want to look at this morning how they took the ark to Jerusalem. It actually resulted in a man's death, as we read this morning, because of some grave errors that they made in the transportation of the ark. This chapter is very important, and sometimes we can kind of gloss over the details. I do it myself all the time. But when you go back and read it a second, a third, or a fifth time, new things pop out at you every time. And the first thing that really stuck out in my mind when I read this chapter was verse 1 of 1 Chronicles 13. David consulted with the captains of thousands and hundreds, and with every leader. And David said unto all the congregation of Israel, if it seem good unto you that it be of the Lord our God, let us send abroad our brethren everywhere that are left in all the land of Israel, and with them also to the priests and Levites who are in the cities and suburbs, that they may gather themselves unto us. And let us bring again the ark of our God to us, for we inquired not at it in the days of Saul. Who did David consult when it came time to bring the Ark of the Covenant back to Jerusalem? He consulted his military council, his captains of thousands and hundreds, and every leader. He did not consult the priests. David's mind was so focused in military mode that he made some critical errors. And you probably know what the Old Testament has to say about the Ark of the Covenant. I'd like to turn up a couple of passages for a moment to refresh our memory as to the specific instructions that God gave Moses and the people of Israel at the time of the construction of the ark, and also later on at the end of David's life, Moses' life. Turn back to Exodus chapter 25 for just a moment, and look at the instructions that God gave back when the ark was to be put together. God was very clear as to the materials. He was very clear as to the size and shape. And he was very clear in particular with a certain set of 4 objects on the ark. In Exodus chapter 25, verses 12 through 15. Thou shalt cast 4 rings of gold for it, and put them in the 4 corners thereof. 2 rings shall be on the one side, and 2 rings on the other side. And thou shalt make staves of shittim wood, and overlay them with gold. And thou shalt put the staves into the rings by the sides of the ark, that the ark may be carried by them. The staves shall be in the rings of the ark, and they shall not be taken from it. Now, if you can, those words into your mind and draw a picture. You have an ark. You have 4 rings on the corners of the ark. And you have 2 staves or rods or wooden poles ran through the rings on each side. They were specifically for carrying the ark. They were the only prescribed method by which God had commanded the people to carry the ark. And on top of all that, in verse 15, it says that they will never be taken from the ark. They would never be disconnected. They were physically, mechanically melted together with the materials of the ark. So that anyone could look at the ark and say, there's the rings, there's the rods, the handles, if you will. Pick it up by the handles. Turn forward in time, if you will, to the book of Numbers. And there's additional information. Again, you may know this, but I'm just refreshing our memories for the sake of the story. In Numbers chapter, well, start in chapter 3. We're specifically told, verses 29 and 30, that the families of the sons of Kohath shall pitch on the side of the tabernacle southward. And the chief of the house of the father of the families of the Kohathites shall be Elizaphan, son of Uzziel, and their charge shall be the ark, and the table, and the candlestick, and the altars, and the vessels of the sanctuary wherewith they minister, and the hanging, and all the service thereof. There was a certain family of the tribe of Levi, and that would be the Kohathites who we just read, who had specific and undeniable control or charge over the materials in the tabernacle, including the ark. Chapter 4 of Numbers, verse 15 tells us that all of the parts and pieces of the tabernacle, including the ark, were the burden of the sons of Kohath. Literally, the word burden means a thing to be carried. And lastly, in Numbers chapter 7, verses 1 through 9. I won't read those, but you can at a later time underline those verses 1 through 9. It's very, very specific in Numbers 7. Look at the offering that the priests make. They actually have 6 wagons and 12 oxen, and they distribute the oxen amongst the families of the tribe of Levi. But they leave one family out, and that's the family of Kohath in verse 9 of Numbers chapter 7. They don't give them any oxen because it says the service of the sanctuary belongs upon them, that they should bear it upon their shoulders. So once we begin to put this information together from Exodus and from Numbers, we get a complete image of the necessary things that God had laid out for transporting the Ark of the Covenant, the most holy and sacred piece in all of Israel, representing God Himself. It had rings, it had rods through the rings to carry it. Only certain people could carry it, and they had to carry it upon their shoulders. They couldn't touch it, we know that, but they could touch the rods. Now, I say all this, again, to remind ourselves of what we're talking about here, so that when we come to the reading this morning in 1 Chronicles 13, we don't just brush over this and think of this as some small mishap in David's kingship. That, they just had a little problem, and they carried it, and then the guy died, and then they got it figured out, and they were fine. This was a serious error. And I mentioned a few minutes ago that David did not consult with the priests when he desired to bring this ark back to Jerusalem. And I, in fact, mentioned that he only asked one group of people what they thought, and that would be his military commanders. 1 Chronicles chapter 13 and verse 3 tells us David's original intent for bringing the ark back to Jerusalem. This was his mindset. He says, "Let us bring again the ark of our God to us, for we inquired not at it in the days of Saul." What does it mean to inquire of the ark? Well, if you'll remember, they used to go before the ark of the covenant in prayer and ask God if they should go to war or not. When it came time for a certain battle, they would go before the ark and ask God, should we fight or should we not? How should we fight? Should we go over there? Should we go over here? And more importantly, are we going to win? That was the purpose of the ark, wasn't it? Remember when the Philistines captured the ark? They began to be successful in their military endeavors because they had the ark. It was almost like a golden charm for whoever had it. David's mindset was very singular. He wanted to make sure he would win his battles. And because of that mindset, he only discussed it with his military leaders.